Hi, I'm Shebi Tawfiq and welcome to Learning C# Scripting in Unity for Beginners. Scripting is Unity's most powerful tool. It gives you the ability to customize objects and control how it behaves in the game. We start with how to make a new C# script, then we move on to variables to store values. Next, we will see how to create reusable code, then conditions and loops for more complex logic. Finally, I will show you how to work with classes and mono behavior and techniques for optimizing your game. In this course, we will be covering all those features and tools and techniques, so subscribe for more content. Now, let's get started with learning C# scripting in Unity for beginners.
So what we're gonna cover today is variables. So what's variables? A variable is used to store information. Now let's go back to our code and talk about how variables work. This is the default Unity script. It includes code that Unity is going to need on the top of the file, and it includes two default methods, start and update, which Unity will automatically call. Start is called at the beginning of the class, and update will be called during the game. A variable requires type. A type determines what kind of data is going to be stored inside the variable. C# have several primitives such as string, float, double, integer, some data types, some dynamic data types, and some static data types such as tables and lists. So before we see the difference between the static and the dynamic data types, let's try to declare some variables. So let's try to declare a new string. So string, it represents any text, so let's try to give it a name. So string, let's say name, and then next we need to use an equal sign in order to set a value to the variable. So string name equal to Laura, then we finish with a semicolon. Then we save our code, we come back to Unity, then we try to attach our script, for example for our game object for the camera. So it is here. We can declare for example, let's try something, debug.log, the name is class name, so automatically it will be printed the name is the value of the name variable, so the name is Laura. When you play our game, it will be automatically printed on the console, so the name is Laura. Let's try to declare some other variables. String, for example, integer, for example x is an integer equal to 10. For example, float, it will be position equal to 0f. We can declare a double, we can declare a boolean, so boolean be y, for example, equal to true. So by default a boolean variable is by default it's going to be false by default. So when we save our code, nothing is shown here in the inspector window, so we need to add some code, we need to set it to a public. So a public variable is usually seen, we can see it here in the inspector part with the name of the variable and with the value if it is set. So for example, when we work with the boolean, let's try to work with boolean y. So public boolean y. So it's going to be by default, this variable is taking the last variable we give it to it. So when we hit play, okay, so let's try to work with some tables. So if we want to declare table, public string, it's going to be a table of strings. Let's call it names equal to a new string. So names, it's gonna be 3. Sorry. When we save in the inspector part, we see that there is a new size is 3 as we give it the code. So we can give Lisa, Laura and Annie. So those are our names. For example, if we want to add the names in the declaration section all together, so we need to type public string public string names equal to new string for example of 2, then for example Lisa and Laura. If you want to work with some dynamic lists, you need before you type your list and start declaration and working with it, you need to add this code. So you need to import this library in order to use lists. So what's the difference between lists and tables? So a table is a static data type. What means a static data type? So when we declare a table of 2 variables or of 2 strings, that means it will be 2. We can't update the table size. It will be always equal to 2. But when we are working with lists, we can declare a list of 5 variables. Then we can add a new variable to that list. We can add a new. For example, the size of our list is 5. When we add a new student or we add a new name, it will be automatically increased by 1, incremented by 1. So how to declare a list? So it's so easy. For example, public list. This list is gonna be a string list. So animals. So we declare our list. So if we save our work here in this part, so there is animals. You see there is not a big difference, but in the inspector window between animals and names. But the difference is that in names is a table, and it's a static data type, but an animals is a list, and it is a dynamic data type. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial. See you in the next tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you next week. Thank you so much.
Now let's go back to our code and talk about how functions work. Simply double-click in the C# script to open monodevelop backup. Whenever we create a new script, our code is presented with two basic functions, the start function and this update function. So functions are basically something that does some tasks, which written inside them. This is the function's body. All our code we want the function to do is written inside. So what the start function does is gets called whenever our script is called every single time. Functions allow us to keep code isolated from execution order when the script runs. The method and the function is very similar, but one thing we need to know and we need to understand is that how we access variable and that access is really changing inside and outside the method. This start function is gets called only once when the script started. So if we write debug.log inside of our start method, hello, and save our code, let's jump into Unity and let's, for example, apply our code in the main camera. So our code contain the debug.log. So if we run our code, this text hello will be printed only one time whenever our game is started and our game is played. And what this update function does, it gets called in every frame. So it gets called again and again in every frame. So you use update function if you want to run some code in every frame. For example, let's write debug.log updated. Let's save our code and jump into Unity and let's clear the console. And now let's try to play our game. So what's happening that if we go and run our code, as you can see, update will be generated in every frame. So for now, it's about 800 updates. So update, and it never stops when the game is playing. We can write our own methods, but we need to start with the return type of the method. Return type gives us information if the method will gives us a value back. We use void when we don't need to return anything. For example, let's try to create a new method. So we start with void, the name, example. So let's try to create a new variable, for example, string text. So this is our new variable. We need to declare the return type. We use void if we don't need any return value. So let's try in the function start to give a value to our text. Text equal value and start. Now let's try. Let's change the layout by default. And now let's try to test our code. So let's try to make it public so we can see the update of the string variable in the inspector. So as you can see, let's select the camera, the text will be equal to none. When we try to execute our code, the text value will be value in start, which we give it in the start function. For example, in the void example, let's try to give a new value to our string. Let's give it value and example. Now let's try to update our code. As you can see, nothing really changed, so the value is the same. So one thing we need to do is to call our void example. So we need to type example in the start. So we call our new method like this. So when we play our game and test our code, when it runs, it gives us the new value and example. Now let's try a new method that return a value. For example, we need to declare a new string example, and let's delete the text value and let's type return. So the void, the new function example, will return the value in example. Now the text value will be assigned to example. For example, let's save our code, let's jump into Unity, and let's try to run our new code. As you can see, the new variable text will have the new value example too. So that's it for today. See you in the next tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for your support. Good night. Now we have go over the basics of variable and functions. Let's take a look at some more complex data structures. Let's talk about how we can test our logic inside our scripts. Let's create a new method and we're gonna call that test with the return type void. We start with the most simple structure of a condition. The most simple condition we can use is the if statement. Before we get started, let's create a new variable health. Health equal to 10. We start with the if statement and we passing the health variable inside the condition, and we're gonna use two equal signs to compare the health with the value 10. So if health equal to 10, debug health is full. So, and before we jump into Unity and try to execute the code, we need to call our test. So we're gonna call it the start function. Let's save and then go into Unity and we're gonna test our code. So health is full. So if health equal to 10, debug log health is full. So else debug so, and now let's change the value of the health. Go back into Unity and we're gonna test our code. So health is not full. So now let's try to give a condition with the else. As if health minus you are in danger. You need more health. Let's try to save. For example, 1. You need more health. So what you need to learn in this composition that we can use multiple if statements together in order to execute our code. So a game is a complex data is a complex logic. So sometimes we need to use more than one if statement in a block of code. Now we have learned how to work with statements. Let's try to learn how to simplify writing conditions to make them easy to work with. Let's try to create a new variable. Is that equal our variable head is a negative value. So now let's try to create a new string. State or mode, let's call it mode equal to is that equal to dead alive. Now let's try to print mode. So what's this? This is what we can call is simplifying our code. So we created a new variable, it's a boolean. So health is equal to 0, so boolean will be true or false. So is dead is gonna be true. So string mode is dead. If is dead equal to true, it's gonna print dead. Else it's gonna print alive. So let's test. Let's clear our console. Now let's try. So it's dead because our value is negative. So if we change it to 10 and we try to execute our code, we're gonna print alive. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for your support. So now we understand how conditions work. Let's take a look how loops work. Loops are going to be really important to us because they allow us to execute a line of code based on conditions, and it will be continue to execute a block of code until the conditions is met. Now let's take a look at for loop. Let's go to Unity and let's create a new C# script. Let's call it loop tutorial. Let's open it up on MonoDevelop. So now let's create a new void. Let's call it loop test. Now let's create our for loop. So for we need to start with a new int I equal to 0. So now it's important to understand that the number we're gonna use for in the for loop is usually have to be an int. So now let's put the condition in which the loop is gonna stop with it when it met. So let's put a semicolon that then we gonna make our new condition I less than 5. Each time the loop goes through, it's going to test if I is less than 5, and once it goes greater than 5, it's going to stop. So semicolon, and now we need to do something that it's going to tell the loop how to how to add a value to I. So how to increment the I. So we're gonna make I plus plus. So here let's print a new message. For example, loop plus I. Let's save our code. Going back to Unity and let's apply our code on the camera. Now, if you see, nothing is going to happen. So let's try to make a call for this loop test. So let's call it once on the start method. So let's go back to Unity and let's start. So as you see, loop 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the fifth is not there. Why? Because the loop started with 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be 5 loops based on the number and the condition we gave in the second statement of the for loop. So for example, if we put 10 and save our code and going back to Unity, and going back, let's clear the console and test again. We're gonna see that the loop goes from loop 0 to loop 9. If you want to add some space, all you need to do is to put space here. Let's test. Everything goes as we want, so it's okay. Now let's try to change the code. So let's change the starting value of I, it's going to be 10, and let's change I will be greater than 0, and the I will be decremented once per loop. So let's save, going back to Unity, and let's start. Now as you see, our value will be started by 10, then going to 9, 8, 7 until we reach 1. So it will be until our condition is met. One of the ways that we can clean up and organize code is by encapsulating it in a class or more classes. By default, Unity automatically creates a new template for us whenever we make a new script. Let's create a new C# script, my class, and let's open it up on MonoDevelop, and let's see how this class works. Our script contains two voids, the start void and the update void, and it contains the libraries we need to run our script, and contains the name of the class. Let's go ahead and delete all of this, and let's try to learn how to create a new C# script from scratch. We need to start with the word public class and the name of our class, my class. At this point, we have our class. Let's save our code and go back to Unity. As you see, we have no script errors. Now let's try to attach this script to our camera game object. So can't add script behavior my class. The script needs to derive from monoBehavior. So monoBehavior is the name of another class inside of Unity. We are actually getting logic from monoBehavior and applying it to our class. The fact is we are extending monoBehavior allow us to apply the script to a game object, and monoBehavior is missing in our class, so we can't apply our code to our camera game object. So let's try to add monoBehavior to our game object. Now let's go back to MonoDevelop and let's try to add our monoBehavior class. So let's try to save our code. So there is a problem. The name monoBehavior cannot be found. Make sure that you add the Unity library, a Unity engine library, in order to use the monoBehavior class, Unity engine. Now let's save. Let's go back to Unity, and all errors will be automatically fixed. So let's try to apply our code, my class, to our main camera game object. So it's applied. So in order to use the monoBehavior class, you always need to call the library Unity engine. On the next tutorial, we're gonna see how to access variables and methods between two classes. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you in the next tutorial. Hello and welcome to this new course. In the last course, we saw what's mean inheritance and how to inherit it from the monoBehavior class. A class defines the kinds of data and functionalities their objects will have. Now we're going to learn how to work more and more with the classes. We're going to start by creating a new class, and we're gonna define some variables, damage amount or max damage amount, and then we're gonna try to access from another class, and we're gonna create a new game object, and we're gonna apply the code to this new game object in order to see the result in the console. So let's get started. Now let's create a new folder and call it script. Then let's create a new C# script and call it custom class. Open it up in Visual Studio, and let's delete start and update functions, and let's delete all the libraries and delete the mirror behavior we spoke about the last course. Now let's create a new public int, and let's call it damage amount. Let's give it a 50 as a value, and let's create a second variable and call it max amount, max damage amount, and let's give it 100 as a value. Now let's save, and let's go back to Unity, and let's create a new C# script, and let's call it test script. Now let's create a new variable of type custom class, and let's call it cc equal a new custom class. Now let's try to access the value of the damage amount of the cc variable. Let's create a new empty game object. Let's call it test, and let's apply our code test class on the game object. Now let's hit the play button, and as you see in the console section below, 50 is printed. Now let's try to create a new method, call it attack, a void attack. Now we're gonna learn how to access voids between classes. Let's give the damage amount equal to the max damage amount. So save the script and go back to the test class, and let's call it here. So now we are going to call the attack void on the test class. Now let's try to print the value of the damage amount again. Now if we clear the console and play button and hit play button, as you see 50 then 100. The 50 is inherited from the initialization we made before, and the 100 is inherited because we access the value of the damage amount on the attack function and we change it. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next course. Now we have been over the basics, how to write the code in C# with Unity editor. It's time to go one step further and join our free course Unity C# Scripting Intermediate Level.